Well, how are you doing, guys, from Yonkers Voice? Today we're sitting here with John Rubbo, Councilman John Rubbo, and the reason we're here today is because of the budget. John, thank you for sitting with us.
Thank you, Ben.
John, it's done deal. It's a done deal. But
is.
not everyone's happy, okay? But everybody knew that we only had two options: losing some police officer, firemen, or taxes go up to close the gap. How do you feel about that?
Well, we would have really lost more than just a handful of police and firefighters. We were talking about losing dozens of officers in the fire union. We were talking about losing almost 72 police officers, officers in the police department. We were talking about clerical staff, Teamsters, and that's only on the municipal side. In addition to that, we were talking nearly 251 layoffs in the schools. So in total, the original budget had proposed just about 400 layoffs citywide, and that would have certainly hurt our city. That included a 2% tax increase. So we would have stayed under the state cap. The budget was passed approximately 2 months after we received it. We received it on April 13th, and on June 13th we passed the budget. And during that period of time, we spent more than 45 hours. And a lot of people watched us. They watched us on television, they watched us on Facebook.
The Yonkers Voice?
And the Yonkers Voice, of course. Really, to get a good sense of the questions we were asking. And we asked questions. We asked questions in depth to every commissioner, to every director that came before us, to the finance commissioner, because we wanted to not only understand how they were spending the money, but why they were spending the money certain ways. And we did our due diligence. And the majority of members on the council right now are, the majority of us are new. We were just recently elected. 4 out of the 7 of us are new to this council. And so I think we asked some very good questions to get a handle on where we're going. Now, the last time, I would say approximately, this is going back before Mayor Spano, but at one time taxes went up 12%. And the city was in a very difficult position at that time. The taxes went up. We needed to close a budget gap. This year, the taxes are going up 6.2%. That's our tax levy that we've raised taxes 6.2%. I'm not happy with 6.2%. I live here. My parents live here. My grandparents live here. I represent a district that has a lot of seniors. And this year alone, for seniors that are collecting Social Security, they're only getting about $18 a month in new Social Security money. And that's a 2% increase. And on average, we're looking at the average taxpayer, the average homeowner, their taxes will go up about $46 a month. So there's a gap, you know, and we get that. And we understand the difficult position we're in, but we felt that it was important to keep Yonkers moving forward. We're moving forward. We have young families moving into the city. We have people investing billions of dollars into the city, and we felt rather than take 2 steps forward, we need to continue backwards. Excuse me. We needed to continue moving forward, and we made a very difficult decision to raise taxes 6.2%. But not to rattle on. But the point is, we're not just raising the taxes. We've negotiated, Anthony Moranti and I were very hot and heavy on adding 2 full-time auditors to the city payroll. And these 2 auditors will work out of the Inspector General's office. It's something that the entire council agreed upon and we voted on. And the mayor is in full agreement as well. So he added that into his amended budget. And those 2 auditors will look at all of the operational procedures of every department. They'll look at how money is being spent and how we could do things more efficiently. And we think that this is a good step to figure out, why are we always in this position? And how do we begin to plan to get out? How do we build a savings account, which is a fund balance, as we refer to it here in the city? How do we take the steps forward to be able to benefit here at home from all of the great development. We have increase in sales tax, increase in income tax, increase in property tax. We have vacant property, especially along the waterfront, but even Boyce Thompson. Boyce Thompson over the next 5 years will pay full property value. That property sat there for 20 years vacant. So,
right.
So we're taking the right steps, in my opinion, that it's not just, hey, 6.2%, we'll see you next budget season. This is 6.2%, and these are the steps we're taking to be proactive in preventing something like this to happen again.
Now, John, in this big, I won't call it a mess, but this big issue with the budget, lots of layoffs were foreseen. It didn't happen.
Right.
But now there is 5 positions. Some people call it layoffs because that is a demotion. That means some position will be vacant. Now, with all these layoffs, why only 5 within the same department were affected? Does this have anything? Is there any type of retaliation against John Flynn? Or why only his group got laid off?
I don't think it's retaliation against any particular person. I think that the amended budget that came before the council, which all 7 council members voted on, included 5 demotions. They weren't layoffs. If you're laid off, you're losing your job.
Well, you lost your job as a lieutenant. You're going to be demoted, so you lost your job.
You're right, and you're demoted. And I think there's a difference between layoff and demotion. We were facing more than 400 layoffs. These are 5 demotions. I don't want to see these demotions, honestly. I know the majority of the people that are being demoted personally, and I don't want to see a single one of them demoted. The administration explained that, this is my understanding, is that there are 5 vacancies in the firefighters, and that by demoting these people into the firefighter spots will help eliminate and begin to save some of the overtime. The overtime that the council president and I have been questioning, the overtime that Councilman Moranti has been questioning, because we want to get a better understanding of why our overtime isn't flattening out. And in some departments, we've seen an increase in personnel, but we have not seen, we also see an increase in overtime. And it's not really trending in the direction we're hoping it to trend. So we're trying to get a better sense of what resources can we as the council provide to the departments to help bring some of that overtime back into levels that are a little bit more affordable. And the city spends about $25 million a year, $30 million a year in police and fire overtime, and some of that's reimbursable. So when you see a police officer working a Con Ed site, that's reimbursed to the city.
Con Edison pays for that.
Right, and that's about $2 million of the police department.
No, the overtime, do you think it's a matter of mismanagement?
No, I believe that there is justified overtime. I think there's also, as we've learned the term of administrative overtime, there are certain caps in place, and now that we've started to look towards overtime, and we can't treat overtime like a bad word. There will always be overtime, and there needs to be overtime. We never want to tell a police officer, don't make that arrest in your last half an hour or an hour
because we don't want to pay for overtime.
Right? No, make the arrest. And we're the safest city of our size because we're the second safest city of our size because we have a great workforce. And so we need we don't want to penalize people for overtime. That's not what we're trying to do. We want to get a better sense of, how can we become more efficient? How can we run more efficiently? Because in a $1.1 billion budget, 83% of our budget is labor. So where do you cut if you need to make cuts? Is labor. And that's why most of what was presented in the mayor's first budget, his first executive budget, included so many layoffs because he was trying to stay within the governor's tax cap of 2%, and at the same time he was trying to make the cuts that needed to be made. It doesn't make sense to put someone out on the street to pick up garbage if we don't have garbage trucks that run. Right. So we can only go so far into cutting that other 20% of the budget that maintains our vehicles and our fleet and buys apparel for our staff. Or as we were going through and identifying maybe where we can make some cuts, we accidentally cut the crematory for animal shelter, and we can't cut the crematory for the animal shelter, right? So these are the things as we've gone through we started to pick up on.
Now, John, lots of people on Yonkers Voice, they send us comments, and one of the question is, perhaps the mayor's office administration, they should not have or should not give too much tax breaks to people that come to Yonkers to build, investors. As an example, the city jail. The price tag on that building was, I believe, 1.6 million. Then they gave him a tax break of $300,000. The property came down to $750,000 with certain conditions. He was supposed to employ people from Yonkers. He was supposed to use that building for, arts in Yonkers. Turned out to be completely different. You got the benefit of the taxes bracket, but nothing happens.
So
that's just an example. There is,
And all I could comment on that is that that sale took place before I was in office. The project was completed before I came into office. So I'm not familiar. All I do know is that they renovated that building. At least from the outside, it looks gorgeous.
Sure does.
We took advantage of selling a piece of property. I thought it was $1 million that they sold it for, because the rumor was that Maya Lin, the artist, literally wrote $1 million check to the city that day and handed it to the mayor. And we utilized an existing jail that existed in one of our buildings that needed some renovating to be brought up to code, but we used a piece of property that we already had.
Okay. Now, going back to the budget crisis, when this whole thing started, most people in Yonkers did not take this serious. They all say, it's another game, for the last 15 years, 20 years or whatever. It's always the same song and dance, at the last minute they're going to find the money, and it did happen.
Right.
Okay. So what makes us think that budget 2019 we are not going to be exactly at the same position? What are we going to do different?
So before I answer that, let me take one step back, because you asked about pilot programs before. So over the past 10 years, we added the city added 20 new projects into the pilot programs, and I think there are about 50 somewhat projects in total. The revenue that we're receiving went from 13 million to 23 million. So we're receiving $10 million more over the past 10 years in property tax revenue from those pilots. And a lot of those properties are properties that had sat vacant for many, many years. Now, the one thing the administration, this current administration, Spano administration, has done is that they're not giving out tax incentives or breaks or pilots for as many years as they once were. And it's my understanding that just recently a property here in, I think along Yonkers Avenue, had a 40-year pilot. 40 years. And so
half a century, yeah?
Right. So the property owner comes back and they say, well, we'd like another 40. And I think the overall sentiment in the city is that they chuckled and said, we don't do that anymore, because people are coming here, they're building here, and they're happy to spend their money here because they see the opportunity. Now, Boyce Thompson, they only have a 5-year pilot, and over the next 5 years, their taxes progressively go up until it's at full value. So those are the types of programs that are being worked out, and we can't look at pilot as a bad word. It's an incentive that's allowed people to come to the city, invest in the city. We're going to see increased sales tax. We're going to see increased income tax. And if you look at the waterfront alone, if 4,000 new residents move to the waterfront, and you take a look at what they're renting for, in the 2,000 plus range per month. So if the average person is making $100,000 a year, and you calculate out there what the income tax to the city will be, we're looking at another $4 or $5 million a year in new revenue. So those are the steps that we're taking so that we can try to get out of this historical year after year, we don't have the money, we don't have the money. So that's pilots. Now to get to your other question is, we will be in this position again next year. And we will because we as a city are doing what we need to help our economic future. But that doesn't happen overnight. It's like turning the Titanic away from the iceberg overnight. It doesn't, it takes time. And those, I think, this administration and now this council and even the former council, we're trying to take the steps necessary so that we're not solely dependent on New York State. And our AIM money, which is aid to municipalities, that's the money the state sends us. And so we send our tax money up, sales tax, and they send back a portion of it. So over the past 8 years, our AIM, our money from New York State, has remained steady at $108 million. And that's coming in from New York State. Now, if that would have increased by 2% a year over the past 8 years, we would have an additional $50, $60 million that we would have been able to work with. And that would have significantly reduced what we would have had to raise the taxes this year. And I think it would have helped us to be able to build a fund balance, a savings account, and to plan going forward. So I am grateful to New York State. I'm grateful to the Assembly for sending us the monies that they did to help balance the budget, especially on schools. Right. It was about 8.8 plus some additional bullet money, but that's only coming down one time. That's not recurring revenue. It's not money that will be here every year. And so starting September 1st, the unions, the taxpayers, the elected leaders, the business leaders in the city, the teachers, the students, the parents, we need to go to Albany and ask for an increase in recurring revenue. Not one-shots, not good for 2019, not good for just 2020, but recurring revenue so that every year we're not going to Albany with our hand out. Now, let us help ourselves.
Now, what about the top money makers accepting or taking a pay cut to help the city that they so much love? Is that working? Is that happening?
So
let's talk about the top ones.
So as far as I'm aware, no one has taken a pay cut. All of the contracts that exist in the city were all negotiated over the past few years. They're all coming to their end of their term. But in this budget, no one took a pay cut.
Okay. Now, let's take, we don't want to make this go forever. But John, tell our audience, those that are in fixed income.
Sure. Because
this gap is going to be closed by the taxpayers.
Absolutely.
There is an increase.
Right.
So what you have to tell them? Because people on fixed income,
sure,
it's going to be difficult for them.
Absolutely. And my parents and grandparents are both on fixed incomes. And so I feel it personally, and I'm sympathetic to every single person in the city. And that's why this was a very difficult decision for us. What I would tell everyone who's watching is that we raised your taxes by, if you're a homeowner, by approximately 6.2%. That was the tax levy. And we're putting in place the necessary steps and processes and efficiencies that will help us going forward. But we still need everyone's help. We need your voice. We need your Yonkers voice, right? But we need
That's
your
right.
voice to be able to let our counterparts in Albany know that we appreciate everything they did for us this year. We avoided layoffs because of what Albany helped us do and what the mayor negotiated with Albany. But we need recurring revenue. And so over the past 5 years, with all of the improvements we've made here in the city, we've sent an additional $250 million to Albany. And so we need some of that revenue back in recurring revenue, not in one-shots, but in recurring revenue. And if we can do that, and as we're making some of the improvements to the pension system and contributions to healthcare, the city is going to head in a direction that's going to help us get out of this constant and continued budget crunch every year. But next year in the Board of Education is going to be another difficult year. And so we're trying to begin planning now so that we're prepared for next year's budget. But we do need help, and I think the city is headed in the right direction. We're certainly better today than we were yesterday, and we'll be better tomorrow than we are today. But we need to really plan on how we're going to get out of this.
So hopefully next year we don't get another increase, probably 3 or 4%, to help close that gap.
Right. Well, so we only have a ceiling of how high we can raise taxes. This year alone, we could have only raised taxes by approximately 13%, and we've already come to 6% this year, right? So we really can't raise taxes that much more before we hit our constitutional ceiling. So we need help. Most other municipalities, they're at a 25% constitutional limit. We're at over 85%. So we do need some more help from the state. I think we're helping ourselves. We have plans in place to get out of this and to be a little bit more fiscally sound going forward. But we're not quite there yet.
Hopefully we'll be there soon.
Absolutely.
Mr. Rubbo,
thank you, Ben.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks so much, and thanks to the people of Yonkers Voice.
Guys, as always, Yonkers Voice is determined and focused in bringing to you the news that is important and relevant. So stay tuned for more.